Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. Okay, so this is not a great time for, a lot of things. One of those things is my vanity. I'm having stress breakouts pretty much all over my face. So, in the interest of being like real, I guess, there's that information. This is a weird time. I did not expect myself to go a little stir crazy because normally, like, being forced to stay inside and write is like not a punishment for me. Work is like my favorite thing. But even I am losing it a little bit. So let's just be really real about how difficult things are right now. I'm sure I don't need to remind you about the importance of washing your hands and keeping your distance from people and staying inside as much as you possibly can, so as not to infect people. I mean, I think the really important piece of that is just because you can't necessarily know if you've been infected, and it's just a very infectious situation. Things are being really mismanaged and everything's sort of up in the air as to when this is going to be over. And the truth is, it might not be for a while. So I know we're all having a little bit of a problem with that. In an effort to sort of help you in the kind of very minimal way that I can, this week, The Lover's Grimm is the ebook, not the paperback. I don't really have the ability to do that with the paperback, especially because Amazon isn't shipping anything that's not essential right now. But the ebook is going to be available for free from basically Saturday at midnight, which has already happened, so hopefully you already have it if you wanted it, and until Thursday at midnight. I just wanted to help you out a little bit. This is my personal favorite collection of the stories. I hope that you guys enjoy them if you have not already read them. If I could please ask you to leave a review if you do end up getting a free copy, that would just really make a huge difference for me. Really appreciate that, but otherwise, please enjoy the stories. I also am thinking I will probably not do a video next week so that I can focus a little bit more on creating some more audio files. So I will try to record more stories. That is what I think I'm going to post next week as opposed to a video. So unless you have some very dire crisis, just expect to find more audio versions of my stories. There's a few things. I've been fairly busy. I finished my robotics YA, the STEM YA, which is called My Mechanical Romance. I am going to be moving on to revising that. In other news, I am also starting to write the Lovely Tangled Vices prequel. I'm currently calling it Sister Vicious, so that will be also coming at some point. If you're having like a hard time writing during this time, I wouldn't put a lot of pressure on yourself. I don't think you need any more pressure than what's already going on and the madness that the world currently is. I am finding myself at a much lower productivity level than usual. I mean, partially because Mr. Blake is here and I don't have as much time, quiet time, and also just because things are really stressful and I've kind of really had to take my expectations down a couple of notches. I'm not functioning at 100%. So I just wanted to reassure you, if you're in that boat, that that's just how things are right now and we will adjust. Oh yeah, and then the only other thing is that I have been working on sort of revamping some old Tumblr posts and turning them into more formal blog posts. I will include those for you in the info section. And you know what? I'm just remembering that I'm supposed to post the discussion stuff for this month's spell read. So I'll do that also. That will post. That will be available to you. This month's book was Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors by Sonali Dev. I really liked it. I think it was a little bit slow, and there were definitely some points where I was kind of like, I would love to have a little, it was like a weird combination of I have too much backstory and also not enough of the backstory that I actually want. But I think it came together in a really interesting way. It's kind of one of those books where once you understand how everything is connected, it's like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. And there were a lot of like social justice themes that I was not expecting. I really liked the book a lot. I thought that the author's voice was very charming. She really came through with a lot of the character's inner thoughts and stuff. And yeah, I was just very charmed by it. It's definitely a slow burn. It is not a very sexy book as far as contemporary romances go, but I did really like it, and I'm looking forward to our discussion about it. Some love stuff. Oh, yeah, also I do have a cup of coffee, although it's not seeming like I need more coffee. That seems like maybe not at the top of the list of things I need. Hi, Olivie, I need some relationship help. With a sad face. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 years. We're in a long distance relationship currently, and I need advice for how I can be there for him when he wants physical comfort. When he's upset, he needs physical contact, and since I can't actually be with him, we get into fights about whether or not he feels supported. I have tried literally everything I can, getting him to talk about the problem, giving solutions, allowing him to just vent and me agreeing with whatever it is, as well as just being quiet and letting him talk and complain. It doesn't help because when he gets upset, he just becomes quiet and needs a cuddle. Everyone has a different love language. His is touch, and I hate feeling inadequate or that I'm not helping him because when I go through those days, he makes me feel better. He feels all alone since he can't get the comfort he needs and I don't know what to do. Any suggestions? Okay, this is obviously rough. I feel like this is a textbook example of when, he's not understanding your love because you're not able to communicate it in a way that's making him feel it. You can't provide him physical contact, so you're going to have to substitute something. You're going to have to find a code. I've talked about this before where sometimes it's a little bit easier to shorthand things in a way that makes sense to both of you. Yeah. Something is going to have to give him contact, I guess. So I'm thinking weirdly, the old toys, the like bop its or whatever, that was just like, it's a bop it and you bop it. Maybe sometimes you can do something like you send him a teddy bear and he gets frustrated and you say, okay, hold that teddy bear's hand because I can't be there and this is the best that I can do. I think in a lot of ways, this is something that is not your problem to solve. You said you've done the best you can, but this is why people have therapists. He can't really rely on you for comfort. I understand what you mean. Obviously, when you're in a relationship, you want someone who's going to comfort you, but I think you've kind of reached the ceiling on what you can actually accomplish from where you are. So for you, you do need to maybe take a step back and realize that there are limits to what you can provide him. And that's just the truth. I don't want you to stress yourself out over the fact that you can't be there for him in a way that he needs. This is why long distance is hard. Not a lot of love languages can be translated, through a video screen or over the phone. So hopefully this is something that has an end date. It is a little bit on him to seek. I tell you guys all the time, right, about how there are some things you have to be able to deal with on your own. There is some level of self-soothing. You cannot and you should not rely on your partner for everything. So just because you are the person I am very concerned about right now, I am going to go ahead and remind you that it is on him in some ways to comfort himself. And I'm only saying that because you've obviously done a lot of work to try to provide him support, and it's not translating to him for two reasons. One, because it's not in a language that he can understand, but you can't necessarily do anything about that. And then two, because I don't know what he's trying to do himself. I think women especially, we often get the burden of emotional labor. It's on us to comfort our significant other, especially when he happens to be a man. And so I just want to be sure that you are not taking on more of that labor than is necessarily your responsibility. Like I said, you could be a little bit creative. You could send him, I don't know, a weighted blanket, a body pillow. There's lots of ways you could probably make that funny or as like a cute gift. But the truth is that you physically can't be there. The closest thing you can do is, if you send him an enormous pillow and then he tells you he's having a bad day and you're like, okay, well, stay on the phone with me and hug the pillow. And this is the best that we can do. You're at least making the effort to provide him something that you know he needs. But yeah, obviously there's nothing you can do in terms of caring more. You obviously care plenty, and he kind of has to meet you halfway. So yeah, you can do a couple of things. You can try one of the things that I just suggested, but he also has to do something about not losing his temper with you. You have the limitations of space and time, and he can't really, not that I'm saying he's blaming you for that. It seems like you really, your message was much longer than what I synthesized it into. And it seems like you really don't want me to get the impression that he is being unreasonable in any way, but he is. He is being a little bit unreasonable. And as much as you love him and care about him or whatever, you are still you. And I'm glad that he makes you feel better when you're in that position. But, what are you supposed to do? You're only one small human being. So yeah. And these are just very challenging times in general. Probably more of us are long distance than we expected to be at this point, because even 6 feet is long distance at this point. Oh, the trials of humanity. So anyway, I think I've gotten a little bit off track, but the point is, I think that you would want to send him a physical object, and then kind of establish sort of a pattern of like, he tells you he's having a bad day and you're like, okay, give the teddy bear a hug, give the pillow a hug, it's me giving you a hug, I wish I could be there. If you want to just like sit here and be quiet for a little bit and just pretend that this thing I sent you is me, spritz it with your perfume or something. Make sure it feels like you as much as possible, even though it's an object and not you. But anything beyond that is, I think that's kind of where you have to decide you've done the most that you possibly can. And from there, it's sort of on him. And that's okay. You have to realize that's okay. It's okay to ask your significant other to kind of, to meet you halfway. So this question had, so this was, hi Olivie, help, I'm in a mild panic because I've been assigned a creative writing project where I can write a short realistic fiction piece about anything, and this is too much power for me to handle, which is so funny, I totally agree. So they had some thoughts, and then their professor said no cliches. So I said, I did already answer this on Tumblr, and it kind of relates to the blog post I wrote about like how to get ideas. So that's available to you. But yeah, so I was like, well, this sounds like a man. And this person responded and said, yes, you were right, the professor is a man, which I thought was just hilarious. So the reason that I thought that the professor was a man is because I feel that the idea that any sort of writing is cliche has slightly misogynistic undertones. It's like how women's fiction is a genre, as if all fiction that's good is like that's all one thing, and then women's fiction is just for women, and it doesn't have to just be, I don't know, it's weird. It kind of reflects the attitude that a lot of men have about romance, which is a predominantly female genre, even though that's very ridiculous. And I won't get into those, even though I want to. I mean, no, I won't get into it. I always think about, nope, I'm getting into it. I always think about the most men lead lives of quiet desperation quote or whatever. That's just total nonsense. Like, do you ever think about the fact, I think I've been thinking about this a lot. This has been keeping me up at night lately. A lot of things have been keeping me up at night lately. But one of them is about how the model of capitalism, the Adam Smith model of capitalism, is based on a system where most caretaking is provided for free by women. At the point when he developed this model, that was just like a fact. And now, we live in a world where most couples cannot afford to live unless both partners are working. And what is the fallout from that when the woman is working? Just so many flaws in the system. And one of them is just the total undervaluing of what women have done throughout history. I'm just really annoyed at this professor. I'm really annoyed in general, and then it's kind of filtering down into my thoughts on this professor saying no cliches, because I feel instinctually that what he means is he doesn't want to come across anything that a woman would write. I don't know that that's true. I'm hoping that it's not, but I definitely think it's a common attitude, and the reason I said was that a man, in a joking way, but definitely also very serious, was that I think that men, for some reason, seem to think that this men lead lives of quiet desperation is a realistic reflection of the world versus when women want to write romance, or when they want to, like when Stephanie Meyer wanted to write Twilight, that got a bunch of hate. The vampire romance is considered a cliche, but why is that any less real than all the stories that men have ever written? I recently read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and I liked it. I didn't love it. I didn't have any problems with it. I did feel it was a little bit long, but one thing I noticed was that the main character was, well, he was a man, and he basically never was bad at anything. Like, his main flaw is that he's, like, arrogant, but, you know, he's well-intentioned, and he respects women, and he, you know, he's arrogant in a way where he's always proven right. But basically he's good at everything he does. He's beloved. And what really struck me is that when I went onto the Goodreads page to leave my review, I noticed that there were a lot more 5-star reviews than there usually are. People on Goodreads they just tear things apart for like no apparent reason, in my opinion. Really, really good books that I think are the best books I've ever read will have, you know, these weird 1-star reviews and whatever. So I go on, this book has all these 5-star reviews, and I'm a little shocked by it because I wasn't that impressed. Like, I thought the magical system was really cool. I thought that was where Rothfuss like really shone. I thought he built the world really interestingly. But I wasn't expecting so many people to be like so amped about this book because it's like so long. Like, I skimmed a lot. It got a little dull. And I just kept thinking, if that main character had been a girl, people would have called her Mary Sue. People would have been like, this is totally unrealistic. Why is she so good at everything that she does? You know, they would have called her unlikable because everything that the main character does in The Name of the Wind is just like, why are you doing this? Why would you don't do this. This is a dumb thing that you're about to do. Don't do this. And, you know, but he does it and you're like, oh, but of course he does it because this is what he's like. And I just kept thinking, this is woman. If a woman had written this book, I don't think it would be this admired. And this is the sensation that comes back to me when I hear your professor saying no cliches, because how cliched is that? You know? And The Chosen One is such a cliche, and yet men write it all the time. So the reason that I'm bringing this up, because this wasn't really a question, it was a question, but the main thing I want to say is I don't think there's such a thing as unrealistic fiction if you're really focusing on the characters. If you're building a story that's rooted in something that's very human, like human emotion, then it is a realistic story no matter what the setting is. The story I read a couple weeks ago, A Year in January, is a deeply realistic story, even though one of the main characters is a fairy from another realm. But it's still about what it means to be human, and therefore I consider it magical realism. Clara and the Devil is magical realism as well. Yeah, the devil comes to town, but all of its themes, the themes of desire and power, that's all very real. I think I got very defensive on your behalf because I don't really think that, I think as long as you're writing something where you've really developed the characters and what they do feels true to to human nature in general and also whatever nature you have set up for them, I think obviously there is bad fiction. There is definitely fiction that either, you know, is superficially plotted or is, you know, it's possible to build fiction poorly. Things are obviously executed poorly all the time. But I think if your assignment is to do something real, and if you focus on what's real to you, I can see why someone might call something that you find interesting a cliche, and I want to reassure you that it probably isn't. That if you're writing something that is sincerely meaningful to you and reflects your experience of the world, then it will always be real. You, this person asking, kind of leapt straight to setting, and I said I wouldn't go to setting. I would focus a little bit more on mood, on atmosphere. If you're, you know, lost, I would focus on just like an emotion that you want to write, and then the story will kind of build from there. I always start with a character or their internal struggle, because that is where the reality is. If you want to write something that's going to resonate with other people, then the way it feels real is creating something that resonates with their experience. Obviously, resonance is something I've talked about before as being something that's really difficult to like bank on, because writing is an art and therefore it is subjective. And how it will be taken is dependent not only on the way you write it, but also on the audience who reads it. So, if this were just a question about how to get ideas, the answer is look around you. Look around you. Look in your own life. Look at the people you surround yourself with. Look at the trials that you face from day to day. Look at what interests you and write the story that you want to write. Especially in this case, you know, it seems like maybe you don't have a whole lot of experience writing, doing creative writing. So it's okay. I've said a lot that the first thing you ever write is usually going to resemble something that has been written before. A lot of what anyone does, what any artist does, not even just artists, science as well, what the first thing you do is replicate something that someone else has done. That may not be intentional. I mean, I'm not saying you're out here trying to copy stuff you've read before, but that's just, you know, originality is something that you develop over time. So if the first thing you write feels a little bit like something that exists, that's fine, as long as you treat it as realistically as possible, as long as you treat it as genuinely as possible. Don't try to write the next Twilight, the next Hunger Games, the next Game of Thrones, whatever. But if it comes out a little bit like that, that's okay. The point is that you want to tell your story in a way that feels true to you. And whether or not that is interpreted as a cliche is, you know, who knows? I'm not the one grading your paper. So I really have no idea what your professor is going to think about it. I just think there's no way to say, I'm going to write something that's never been written before. I mean, that's honestly a lot of hubris. It's very hard to decide, like, I'm going to do this very novel thing that's never been done, because a lot of stuff has been done. A lot of human history has just been building on stuff that other people have made. And it's not that an idea is so original. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with the idea at all, but the way you express it and the way you communicate it, the way you tell your story is so much, it's just a huge piece of what the story itself is. So this was kind of a long ramble that I don't even really know what I wanted to say here. I told you I'm losing my mind a little bit. But I just really feel like one of the things that keeps women especially from being true to themselves is when their interests are judged as being cliche or as being overdone or as being simplistic or whatever. It's being valued on a scale that isn't yours, and it irks me. I don't like that. So I do think it is a silly rule, even though I understand sort of what he's trying to say. I think what he's trying to say is don't attempt to create something that's already been created. However, if it comes out that way, that's okay. You're learning. You're in a class. This is part of your education, to learn how to tell a story that really resonates with someone. So how do you do that? By trying to tell a story that resonates with you. Tell a story that feels like your story. Don't aim for greatness. Don't aim for anything. Write with integrity. Write something that reflects you and your truth and your values and your themes. And don't be ashamed of those things. Just embrace them. I don't think there's such a thing as an unrealistic piece of fiction unless you're literally trying to copy something that's been done before. Someone may interpret something as unrealistic, whatever, that's on them. If it's real to you, it is real. Okay, so anyway, Like I said, I'm going to probably skip next week unless something urgent comes up, which I hope it doesn't. I hope everybody's fine and staying inside. We're all just trying to decrease the likelihood that this disease will harm people. We really don't want to do that. I know it sucks. There's so many people in my life who I know are losing income because they rely on clients or whatever. And yeah, it's hard to not just feel really bad all the time. But, you know, we're in this together. We're doing this the best we can. Don't forget, The Lover's Grim is currently available, the ebook. And yeah, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.